There's a lot of truth in the old adage, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger. Adversity can make us stronger people and better leaders. In fact, the Center for Creative Leadership reports that over 66% of leadership capabilities are forged through challenges. While not all of us make it as heads of state or CEOs of multi-billion rand organizations, we do face our own personal and professional challenges, and there are certain fears we have that manifest day to day without fully understanding them at a deeper level. Well, to discuss, I have in studio with me Dr. John DiMartini, Human Behavior Specialist. Welcome, John. Great to have you with us.
Thank you again.
So we have fears, we acknowledge them personally, but why is it so difficult for us to actually fully admit to them?
To the idea of how important challenges are?
To admit to the fears that
we
have around challenges, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that it's possible that when we're a child, and I'm speculating to some degree, possibly when we're a child, if we're a crybaby, stuff it up, we're taught, boys and girls many times, not to let the emotions run wild and to overrule those. Mm-hmm. And anytime we have an anxiety or a fear or an emotion, sometimes we're judging ourselves for having that. So part of that is cultural. But I hope you don't mind, but I'd like to address something you said about leaders and about challenge.
Yes.
And this will address fear indirectly.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use a story of a little boy that I bet everybody can identify with. If you look carefully in a young boy who's 12 years old, 10, maybe 12, and who loves his video games, he'll play his video games for hours and master that video game. And the moment he masters that video game, he will figure out a way of manipulating his parents to get him a more advanced one.
Yeah.
He'll work for it if necessary, but he'll try to figure out a way of getting, how do I get that more advanced, that next game, number 2, number 3, number 4. And he will want to advance himself. And whenever an individual is doing something that is truly meaningful and inspiring and fulfilling to them, they pursue challenges that inspire them. They wake up the executive center in the brain, which actually engages and looks for challenges to solve. That part of the brain loves that. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't live in the phobia mentality, the fear mentality.
The fear mentality.
It pursues challenges that inspire them. In fact, one of the most significant things that you can do to wake up leadership capacities in individuals is to find out what they really value and allow them to pursue solving challenges that are meaningful to them. There's a young girl who is 12 years old, built an entire plane from scratch, every design, every engineering piece, everything, and built an entire plane by herself. She's a mathematician, she's an engineer. She was 12 years old and built a plane and was the youngest person to fly a personal plane that she built. Mm-hmm. She loved mathematics, she loved engineering, she loved tackling these things. And we automatically are designed to pursue challenges that inspire us when we're living congruent with what we value. When we're not living by our highest values and attempting to live by other people's values, which we could call repression and suppression of our own identity, trying to fit in, trying to live by other people's expectations, trying to not be rejected, trying to appease other people. Mm-hmm. The unfulfillment that occurs in our life puts us out of the executive center in the brain and into a more primitive part of the brain or more basic part of the brain we call the amygdala. The amygdala is like an animal center, and it wants to avoid predator and seek prey. And it wants the easy path, and it wants pleasure without a pain, and it wants ease without difficulty, and it wants support without challenge, and it wants positive without negative. And life is like a magnet. You always get two sides. So striving for that which is unavailable and trying to avoid that which is unavoidable is a source of human suffering. And so our phobias are the fears of those negatives without positives, and our philias are the pleasures of looking for a pleasure without a negative. A positive without a negative. Yeah. And every phobia has a philia associated with it. If you stop and really get down to what phobias are, there's never a phobia without a philia. There's never a nightmare without a fantasy. There's never a depression without an elation comparison. because your depressions are comparisons of your current reality to a fantasy you're holding on to about how life's supposed to be. So they always come as a pair. So those fears that we have are a byproduct of not living congruently with what we value most. And those fears are not our enemies. Our fears are designed to wake us up to the fantasies we're pursuing that are not authentic, to make sure we pursue what is authentic. And the moment we do, we have objective reason and we have more balanced perspectives and we don't let fears run our life. And that's where the leader emerges. They walk through their fear and they turn on the light, the darkness of the fear. And they see it from a more objective or balanced perspective. But the person who's not pursuing what's meaningful to them is constantly trying to avoid the pain and seek for the pleasure and avoid the negatives and seek the positives. And they're vulnerable to phobias because they're vulnerable to philias, fantasies.
So would it be correct to say that we will want to conquer, or we will conquer the fears that are standing in the way of us achieving our greatness?
Well,
we will choose to conquer those fears.
Yes, but I want to not limit it to conquer the fear, because I think that's an incomplete thing. We have to conquer our addiction to the fantasy that accompanies the fear in the first place. For instance, let's say you're a young woman and you meet this really handsome guy and you think, oh my God, this is the one. This is my man. And you really you get dopamine.
Yeah.
So you're kind of addicted to it. You get oxytocin because you want to bond to it. You get enkephalons and endorphins. You get pleasure. You get serotonin. You get fantasy. Oh, my future.
Yeah.
Now that you're infatuated and you have a fantasy about this person, you're gonna have fear of the loss of that man.
Yep.
You didn't have a fear of loss of that, but now if you were to accumulate a balanced perspective, which eventually occurs, and you start to see just as many drawbacks as benefits, which eventually will occur because men have both sides. Eventually, once it's balanced, you don't have a fear of them leaving you.
Yeah.
In fact, if it goes the other side and you have more negatives than positives to this, and now you resent the person, you have a fear of them coming close to you. So you automatically, because now you have a fantasy that life will be better away from them. And whenever you have fantasy of life will be better away from them, now you have the fear of them coming near you. If you have a fantasy that being without them would be terrible, now you have a fear of the loss of them. So every phobia has a philia. The person who lives by their highest value and uses their executive center uses objective reason to strategize and plan and mitigate the risks. And therefore they're more likely to take action because they're not interested in fantasies or phobias. They're interested in bringing those together because they know that real accomplishment will require both, the positives and the negatives. And they mitigate the risks and think about those risks and think of strategic contingency plans to solve them. So strategic planning is designed to mitigate fantasies. So you're not here to conquer your fears only. You're here to conquer your fantasies and your fears by those imbalanced perspectives. Because that's a subjective bias, those polarities, and an objective reason is the ability to see both sides and pursue a goal that has both sides.
What are some of the most common fears we face?
There are seven.
From your experience with working with
there's
people,
seven of them. The fear of not knowing enough, not being intelligent enough, not having a degree enough to be able to make wise decisions, to pursue what you want. And that is primarily because of a subordination to somebody you think is more intelligent than you. That if you're the smartest person in the room, you don't have that fear. But if you're around somebody you think has more intelligence than you, you immediately have that fear because it's a comparison.
Sure.
The second fear is the fear that you might fail in the pursuit of what you want as a business or career. And that's because you're comparing yourself to somebody you think is more successful than you. If you go to a place that's unemployed, a group of people unemployed, you don't have that fear in front of them. But you have that fear in front of people that are very successful in business. You get intimidated by them and now you have that fear.
So if you're afraid of public speaking...
The fear of public speaking is not the fear of speaking, you do it every day. It's the fear of speaking in front of somebody you think has more than you in the topic or the area that you're about to talk about.
Or maybe the fear of failure as well.
Or the fear of failure, which again is a comparison. The third fear is the fear of not making money or losing money pursuing it. And then again, it's the fear, because if you're around people that don't have any money at all, you don't have that fear. You feel prosperous, comparison. But the second you're around people that have more wealth than you, you feel, oh my God, I don't want to lose my money because then I'll be less than. And the next fear is the fear of loss of loved ones or the respect of loved ones. This happens in a lot of Indian families and Jewish communities where there's a lot of cultural family unity. Now, if I don't fit into the family, I can be ostracized and rejected, and there's a tremendous amount of fear of losing loved ones and the respect of them. And again, because you put them on pedestals, you're giving power to that person in the family more than you. You don't have the fear of loss or even their opinion about you if you're resenting somebody. It's only the people you put above you. The next one is the fear of rejection. And that's, again, putting somebody on a pedestal and thinking their opinion's more important than your own. And the next last one is the fear of not having the attractiveness, the beauty, the physical stamina, the strength, or the health to pull off what you want to do and to fulfill the goals that you have, whether it's raising a family or whatever. You don't know if your health will sustain and your beauty will sustain. This happens in many women in their 50s. All of a sudden they have that fear surfacing. They don't know if they can compete with their attractiveness. And the last fear is the fear of breaking the morals and ethics of some spiritual authority that you've subordinated to. Some idealism that may not even be a real thing. It may be some dogma that doesn't even have a way of living. It's hypocrisy possibly. But we're comparing ourselves to that and then judging ourselves and then fearing, oh my God, what will the world think if I don't match this way of living? So those 7 fears or combinations hold people back from pursuing what they really want. And they're due to comparisons and the injections of values of other people into their life. Instead of standing strong in what they value most and being willing to be ridiculed, violently opposed, until they become self-expressive as a unique individual making a difference in the world.
Do you think eventually, again from your experience, we outgrow these fears over time?
We have
Or do we need to consciously work through fears that we are aware of?
Well, fear is an assumption that you're about to experience in the future through your senses or your imagination, real or imagined, more negatives and positives, more pains and pleasures, more losses and gains, more difficulties than eases. There is no such thing. It's a false evidence appearing real. It's an assumption that you're about to have that. In reality, with every crisis, there's a blessing. With every door that shuts, there's a window that opens. There's always 2 sides. So it's an irrational, actual perception. And so what we do is we have those fears because we're making assumptions. Can we transcend those assumptions? Every day I work with people and I help them see the other side to it. I had a lady that had a fear of spiders. And we sat down and educated her on what spiders are actually poisonous, which is a very tiny percentage. And then we actually had her go and interact with tarantulas and other spiders and stuff like that. And she actually started kissing them. And then all of a sudden her fear wasn't there because she saw new associations. She had grown up in a family with a mother that would freak out every time a spider was there, and she was trained, that's what you do when your spider's there. We gave her all the upsides and the other benefit sides to the spiders and showed her which ones there would be a concern and which others aren't. And we transcended that fear. But it's an imbalanced perspective that leads to phobias and fantasies. You balance it out, they both dissolve, and you're ready to move forward again.
So you've offered advice inadvertently, but what would you say to anyone out there on how to deal with a fear that comes up? What are the steps they should take?
Well, probably the simplest approach is to ask what specifically is it I'm fearing, define it, define what it is, and then ask, okay, if the worst case scenario was to happen, how would I win? And how would I use that to my advantage? Because there's always 2 sides to it. There's a benefit side. I've had people, I've interacted with people in the breakthrough experience with just about every imaginable thing that a person can go through. And I've yet to see a situation that you can't find blessings to and benefits to. I've not seen one yet. I've had people go through horrendous experiences in their minds. And I always say that in order to make it a tragedy or a terrible or some turmoil or something, you have to choose to narrow your mind and see only one side of it. And the phobia is the willingness to see only one side of an event, not the other side. And if you see the other side to it and the blessing side of it, there's no fear there. So it's the willingness to ask questions. The quality of our life is based on questions we ask. If we ask questions that make us reveal to our unconscious side the parts that are the positive side to these negative sides, or the blessings to the curses, we can dissolve it by awakening the unconscious to the benefit side.
And just educate ourselves on the subject.
It's an education. We have way more phobias. I could go off on a tangent, but I'm not. In anthropology, the religious and spiritual development of people through history transcend fear by fear by fear as we go through our religious experiences. We start out being frightened of almost everything, and we make a God to protect us from almost everything in the world. To eventually we put that into kind of a monotheistic idea that can superempower, like a father figure that overprotects us from the things, to eventually realizing there's nothing to fear.
Yeah.
That was an illusion. We eventually have reason that helps us override that, and objective reason transcends the emotional phobias that most people live in. That's why living by your highest values, where you activate the executive center, gives the highest probability of transcending the fears and encouraging the pursuit of challenge, which makes leaders.
Very profound. Thank you so much for the advice.
Yes, thank you.